Welcome, everyone. We are excited that you were able to join us tonight for our forum. The topic this evening is going to be starting the year strong with classroom management, rituals, and routines. And even though many of you have already started your year, these are practices that are infinitely improvable, and we can always be thinking about how we can get better at classroom management, rituals, and routines. My name is Erin Coker, and this is my third year now at GSN as a senior director, and I have the privilege to support schools across the state with implementing a variety of education grants, from literacy to school improvement, MTSS, and before and after school programming. Before I joined GSN, I worked in Denver Public Schools for 15 years, and I had a variety of different positions there as well. I started as a teacher, and I was a literacy coach and specialist, a school improvement partner, and a district administrator. I've also worked at the national level as a curriculum developer. So lots of different expertise in education. So now I'll pass it over to my colleague, Olivia, so she can introduce herself as well.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for spending an hour with us this evening. We really appreciate your dedication to improving your craft. My name is Olivia Bachicha. I'm the Vice President of Field Services for Generation Schools Network. I am going into my 7th year with GSN. I pretty much service a lot around school improvement, leadership development, data-driven instruction, curriculum, best practice, MTSS, social emotional learning, pretty much falls under any of those umbrellas. I have been in education for 32 years. I'm a former middle school teacher. I was a middle school, high school, and primary principal for 17 years. Did a lot of work with rural schools. I'm from Trinidad, Colorado, worked in the same district for 26 of those years. So I'm really excited to be with all of you today.
Thanks, Olivia. And we also have our colleague Phoebe here with us. And they are going to be doing all of the behind the scenes work for our session today. Phoebe, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Phoebe Ambrosino. My pronouns are they, them. I've been with Generation Schools Network for a couple of months now. So also just starting out. I do our events coordination, communications coordination, and product development coordination. So today, all you need to know is that I'll be looking at the chat, making sure that all of your questions get answered. Feel free to check that regularly. If you have anything that you want to pop in there, I'll be looking at it. And then I'll be sharing any links to any resources, which I will drop our first link in a moment. But yeah, feel free to hit up the chat if you need anything and have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Phoebe. All right, so we'll dive in and share a little bit about our objectives tonight. We have 4 really fun, exciting objectives this evening. We are going to share strategies to support intentionally building relationships with students, as we know that that is so important for our work as educators. We're going to be sharing with you all a framework for creating and teaching clear classroom expectations. We know that clear is kind and that it sets a positive classroom culture. We are also going to be sharing with you all some highly effective teacher moves that you can use in the moment to support classroom management. And then finally, we are going to be sharing some strategies for administration to come alongside teachers to coach and support this work of developing a positive classroom culture. So not just for current administration, if you are a teacher who is aspiring teacher leader or thinking about being a leader, this is also work that you can engage in as you support your colleagues. All right, and we want to tell you a little bit about Generation Schools Network as well before we dive into our content this evening. At GSN, our vision is that we want a world where schools and communities work together to ensure every student realizes their full potential in school and beyond. And with that, our mission is to create Generation Schools Network increases access to equitable learning experiences by partnering with a diverse network of education stakeholders to ensure that all students have the opportunity to thrive. All right, now we would love to get to know a little bit more about those folks that are in the room tonight. So if you could share, please, in the chat, your name, district and school, your role, and then we'd like to hear how you heard about this forum and or what you are most excited to discuss. So let's go ahead and fill that chat up with some more info. So again, your name, district, school, role. How'd you hear about the forum and what are you most excited to discuss? We would also welcome any folks who would like to come off of mute and share a little bit about themselves, how they heard about our forum, and what they're excited to discuss. Wonderful. Thank you, Maddie. Is from Mirror Image Arts. It's a non-profit theater youth advocacy organization. Wow, awesome. And you are in the right place. We're going to talk a lot about rituals, routines, classroom management. Ryan from Wiley School here in Colorado, 6th grade teacher. Mal Cooper, who is a principal. Jose, who is also from another nonprofit. Thank you for being here. Wonderful. It looks like we have a variety of folks in the room, from nonprofit to teachers to school administrators. Thank you all so much for spending this time with us. And we're looking forward to learning more about the important work that you all do in your school, district, and nonprofit organization. Continue to fill up the chat if there are some folks who haven't yet introduced themselves. All right, so before we dive into the content for our session, we want to revisit this definition of best first instruction that comes from the Colorado Department of Education. This helps to ground us whenever we have these forums around the topic of what is best first instruction. So CDE says when planning for best first instruction, or BFI, the foundation requires educators to build meaningful relationships with all students, address individual needs, create relevancy by allowing students to see themselves in their learning, and provide opportunities for exploration and expression. The educator also utilizes instructional materials and strategies that honors the diversity of their classroom. And to add to our understanding of BFI, best first instruction, these are the 4 main components that CDE calls out. And as you can see, the top 2 really connect nicely and align well with our objectives of this session, building relationships and meeting the needs of all students. So when you join us for more sessions around BFI, you might also encounter relevancy and fostering disciplinary literacy. All right, so to begin tonight, we are going to dive right into building relationships, as we know that that is one of the most important things that educators can do to start the year strong, and it's critical to making the impact that we want to see with our students academically. We also have a one-pager for you all that has all of the links and info for the session tonight. So Phoebe is going to pop that in the chat. Awesome. All right, so we want to start off sharing a great resource for you all to consider. There are 10 different ways that you can build relationships with students, and we've provided this link for you in your one-pager, so you can go a little deeper into this article. But just to get us started, there are 10 ways that we can think about building relationships with kids. One, we want to talk to them about non-school related subjects. We really want to get to know them for who they are during school and outside of school. We want to let them teach us, we want to let them teach you about their interests. We want to remember things about their lives. It's always really special when we can connect with students in the hallway and we can remember something that they've shared with us about who they are. We also want to share about our own lives as educators. We want to engage in fun activities with them. It's also really great to tell funny and even, as it says here, embarrassing stories, especially if you are a middle school teacher. We want to share inspirational stories from our lives. We want to do crazy things. We want to use their interests in our lessons and activities. And of course, we always want to model this. We want to apologize when we mess up. So want to highlight a strategy here that hits on almost all of the 10 ways to build relationships from the previous slide that you can use starting tomorrow, and it doesn't require a ton of prep. So the 2x10 strategy, what this means is 2 minutes a day for 10 days. So we've provided for you a question bank, but you can use your own questions as well. But what you want to do is pick a question, a new question for every single day, and spend 10 minutes connecting with your students around that one question and get to know them. And they can get to know each other as well. And if you do that for 10 days, then you're being really intentional about carving out that time and ensuring that you get to know your students, they get to know you, and they also get to know each other. It's also an opportunity to go a little deeper. And so we suggest that you consider how you can be proactive, especially this time of year, by identifying students to have additional one-on-one conversations with. So maybe you connect with the teachers from the previous grade level and you ask them, which 5 students would you suggest that I spend a little additional time getting to know a little more? Or maybe during your PLC, you want to sit down with your colleagues and look at attendance data and say, of all of our students, which students really didn't get to school as much as we would like them to? And start building relationships with those students in the hopes that we can engage them at the beginning of the year and we can keep them engaged throughout the year. So that is the 2x10 strategy. It's a really handy strategy to use. And at this point, we'd like to pause for a second and get your thoughts. So how might you? And now we're going to dive into talking about the importance of developing classroom expectations and how you would go about doing that. All right, so first we want to share with you a checklist that can be really helpful in your planning as you're thinking about developing your classroom expectations or refining your classroom expectations. And this comes from a book called The Habits of Highly Effective Teachers. I will also say this author of this book has a very robust YouTube channel with lots of really great videos. So if you want to venture off to the internet and learn more about that, that would be a suggestion that I would offer. So this list that you see up on your screen helps guide planning as you're thinking about what it means to set those clear classroom expectations, and developing classroom expectations with your students creates a positive and safe and productive learning environment. So we would say here that we want to negotiate no more than 3 to 5 classroom expectations, that these classroom expectations are prominently displayed in your classroom, that we've not only expressed our expectations for students, but that students have expressed their expectations for us, and that we're making those connections to our school values and expectations. And of course, we want to, before it happens, discuss with students possible consequences for not following classroom expectations. And here we have an example of a teacher's classroom expectations. You are more than welcome to use these or modify these, but these are the 3 that we borrowed from another teacher. In our classroom, we listen to each other and seek to understand. We support each other with our learning, and we treat each other with respect and kindness. One of the most important things to remember about classroom expectations is that they need to be a living document and a living agreement in our classrooms, and that we go back to revisit them often, and that we teach these expectations very explicitly to our students. So we teach the expectations because we want to teach the behavior that we want to see. We positively reinforce appropriate behavior with specific feedback. We let the student know what it is that they did that we really want to praise. The classroom expectations are always revisited prior to learning activities and tasks because we want to make sure that we're setting students up for success. We refer to classroom expectations when students are displaying appropriate behavior, I would say way more than we do with inappropriate behavior. The more we can highlight the positives that are happening in our classroom, the more the inappropriate behavior will start to fade away. And then we, of course, want to explicitly teach students the process for the transition times that we have in our classroom and as we go in between classes and our school day. All right, so one example of how you can teach these expectations to your students is it's pretty simple. You go through the 3 to 5 classroom expectations that you have, and you ask students to name specifically, the more specific, the better. What does it look like and sound like in our classroom when we embody this expectation? So when I say we're listening to each other and we seek to understand, give me specific examples of things you might hear and see in our classroom that mean that we know exactly what that means. We're embodying that expectation. You can even have students work together to try to come up with as many examples as they can. And you can have them write one example per sticky note and really put up in your classroom what those expectations look like. Once you have those examples, it's also really easy for you as the teacher to point them out when you see them. So on the previous slide, we talked about referring to class expectations when students are displaying appropriate behavior. If we've done the work of talking about what that appropriate behavior looks like and sounds like, then it'll be up on the wall that our students have already identified. And so we can shine a light on it when we hear it and see it. All right. So with that, we're going to pause for a second and have a short discussion. Olivia?
Want to go ahead and click the next slide?
Yep.
So yeah, so to try to get this in perspective, we're going to talk about the big 8 strategies that you can implement when you're wanting to see engagement improve in a classroom. As we all know, if we want to enhance and increase student achievement and student learning and make it a student-centered learning environment, those students need to be actively engaged in the learning, not passively. I mean, a lot of times we think that because they are at their desks sitting quietly, doing something, that they are, actively engaged in the learning. But we want to ensure that they are becoming student-centered learners, and we can do that through these big 8. So we're going to talk a little bit about each one of them, but a quick overview of the first one is expectations, which is what Erin just went over, but not just expectations for classroom behavior, but expectations for everything, right? Like, what is the process for when we come into the classroom? Do we do a bell ringer right away? Do we sit in a circle? Do we go to cubbies to get out our assignments? Do we pull out our notepads? What are we doing? What are we doing? What is the expectation? We want to ensure that we use attention prompt focus. It's very important that students are able to focus on what's happening, and we need to draw their attention to what that is before we start talking away. A lot of times we see teachers doing all the work, and so we want to make sure that kids are involved and focused on what the specific instruction is being targeted to. Proximity is definitely how the teacher moves around, right? We know that not sitting behind the desk is not the best way to ensure that students are actively engaged in instruction. And with this one, we do have a video that we're going to show you that's pretty amazing, how the teacher visually addresses students by their levels of understanding. Cueing is the 4th one. making sure that you're using positive, clear, and effective verbal cues. So 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Excuse me. Counting down, turning off a light switch. There's a lot of different ways that we can get cues for people to come back to task when we're transitioning from one thing to another. Signaling, they may do a give me 5. That's one to stop kids from, if you're in a large group of children and they're talking and actively engaged, and instead of, hollering, wanting everyone to stop, you just do a give me 5. Everybody puts their hands up. They know to start paying attention, eyes on the speaker, and so forth. Time limits. A lot of students really appreciate the fact, just as we do as adults, to know exactly how much time we're going to spend on something. And I know that in classrooms, when you start teaching, that's, well, how long do I have to do it? How much do I have to write? How long are we going to read this? So let's just give them the time limits immediately, so that way they understand what we're going to spend and how much time we're going to spend on each task. And then tasking. Tasking is where we're very specific to those questioning strategies that we're using. They're purposeful to make sure that we're provoking thought processes in kids so we can increase that rigor. And then the last one is voice. A teacher's voice is very, very effective in instruction, classroom management, all of the above. We have to be careful how we use our voice, because it can also be hurtful for children as well. So we'll dive deeper into the first one, expectations. So expectations should be immediate. They must be developed ahead of time. They depend on established habitual expectations. So you want to make sure that those expectations, you've thought about it. You thought about how you want this lesson to go. You've thought about how you want your classroom to be ran. You thought about how you want students to line up, how they should behave when they go to the cafeteria. And those expectations become habitual for children. So we're not changing them every day. Those are things that they know, they're routines, and they get used to doing it. Those habitual expectations require a lot of practice. They require consistency, and they require time. More often than not, we have to do it over and over again. And especially if over Christmas break, when you come back in January, you need to make sure you retrain your whole school again on whatever some of those expectations might be, especially if you're dealing with the babies like I had primary students. And we can maintain those expectations through our movement and through our cueing and proximity. The second one is attention prompts. So again, we want to ensure that we have rules and expectations that are set at the beginning of the year. I'm sure a lot of you know about the First Days of School by Harry Wong. There's also Fred Jones is another one that gives some good information regarding the importance of setting those expectations at the beginning of the year and keeping them consistent throughout that. We always want to model, repeat, and observe what we're talking about. Sometimes if we're using a tapping of the shoulder for getting kids back on task, then that's a consistent strategy that we would use, and kids would be familiar with that. When you have attention prompts, you're going to reduce discipline and you're going to reduce attention problems, because those prompts for those kids that are struggling to stay focused bring them back to the task at hand. All age levels need prompts, including us, because if not, we'll get distracted very easily, especially now in the world we live in with social media, internet, technology at our fingertips. It's always great also to sing a song, use visual prompts, do some verbal 1, 2, 3, eyes on me that is consistent and always the same process, so kids remember what that means. Next, we have proximity. This is very important in classroom engagement and management, because the students know that the teacher is actively involved in, one, being available to them if they are struggling, especially if they're doing independent practice. But it also lets the kids know that the teacher is aware and present of what their behavior is, what their learning needs are, and if they need any assistance. The teacher moves around with intent and anticipates the student's needs. And this video that we're going to show you is going to demonstrate just how this teacher does that. But the teacher also communicates with the students through his posture, his tone, his gestures, etc. So it's very important that how we're reacting to students, what we're saying, our facial expressions, our body language, kids pick up on all of that. So we want to ensure that that's positive and productive as we're completing the lesson. So we're going to go ahead and show you a quick a video. One thing about proximity too, it depending on the age group, we know that our younger students, 10 minutes is about all that they can sit and do an activity if we're looking up to about age 7. So it's really important that that proximity can come in instead of keeping all kids maybe at circle tables. Maybe we bring them to the floor, bring them back, do different activities for them so they have that mobility. So this is an example of proximity as the teacher is instructing, and she's monitoring the level of which the students are understanding the task at hand.
Know exactly what you need to do to answer this question appropriately. Okay? All right, so personal insight questions. So I need to see all of your screens right now at number 1.
Proximity is such an important instrument in classroom management. It's a way of really making sure that you work the entire crowd, you have control of your entire classroom regardless of where your student's sitting. If you're consistently moving throughout the class period, you really are able to engage all of your students. So when I think about proximity in my classroom, I think of areas. I think of 3 specific areas. I think of an area right where I am, which I would consider to be the red zone. I think of an area that's just outside that zone, which is a yellow zone, if we're going to go with this, traffic light symbols. And then there's the area on the very outside, and that'll be your green area. So with the red area, these are the students that are 100% engaged. My presence is right there. If they have a question, they're more than likely to pop that hand up. The students right on the outside of them, that's your yellow area. So they're watching you, they're watching your moves, they're making eye contact with you, but the second you turn their head, they may be the students that might turn to a friend and make eye contact with them or nod their head, And then my green area, that's my area that I need to get to probably next. Those are the students that are waiting for me to turn my back. Those are the students who are watching every move because they know I can easily do this and then they're going to do something. So I'm never in just one spot. I'm always constantly moving, and so those areas are constantly changing. And so it can just take 2 steps to move one student from a red zone to a yellow zone. It could just take 2 steps to move a green zone to a red zone. So just constantly moving, you're going to have complete classroom management. Your students will know that you are aware of what's going on and that you have control. One of my favorite things about proximity, other than it being a huge classroom management tool, is it really does build student rapport as well as student confidence. There are a lot of students who are afraid to ask questions, and if you are parked at one point of your classroom and you're not really moving, they're not going to want to raise their hand because then they're worried about what other students are thinking of them or whether it's a dumb question. If you're walking through your classroom and you are constantly moving, you'll notice that as you're walking, those hands are going to pop up wherever you are. And so you're building that confidence by immediately giving them the feedback they want. You're looking at their work to make sure that they're accessing the standard or skill. You're getting that immediate formative feedback, but you're also building that rapport with that student as well. You're being approachable for that student.
Okay, so the next one is cueing. Cueing definitely uses positive verbal recognition, identifying those students who are on task, maybe following expectations. It's a reinforcement of skill. So I sure like the way Mary is sitting with her hands in her lap, ready for learning. She's sitting in a reading position, those types of things. It's directed to the specific receiver. So again, you're specifically saying you like how someone is doing a certain behavior, and it provides clarification and maintenance and redirection. Signals are those physical indicators that students are ready to move on. Put your pencil down when you're done completing your journal entry. It improves transitions. Using thumbs up is one of the biggest strategies I'm sure a lot of you use in elementary school. Put your finger on the first word. You can put your hand in your heart box. Point to the word that you're struggling with. Those types of things. Those signals help students to focus and draw attention to the learning need that they're requiring. Time limits. Like I said earlier, everyone wants to know how much time it's going to take to do, to get from point A to point B. So when we give those students those time limits, it helps them focus on exactly how much time we're going to be spending on a specific target. It does improve the teacher's pacing of the lesson, and it allows for those research-based strategies that may take more time than others, the opportunity to get that done. It's easy nowadays. You can do the virtual timers on the screen, but you could always do the old-fashioned stand ones, clocks, whatever it might be that are fun for the kids and depending on their age group. Tasking, this is probably one of the highest forms of active engagement for students. This allows students to become the center of the learning because they are doing the work while they're learning, and all the work isn't being done by the teacher. So we want to ensure that those questioning and assessment questions are open-ended, so that allows for students to really process and take their learning to the next level. The last one is voice. Voice engages all students. It can calm students. It can convey information and directions. It communicates respect, but it also can do damage if we are using our voice in a negative way. So we want to be always very careful on how we sound, our pitch, our tone, our cadence, our articulation, because this could be one of the most effective tools you use in the classroom, but it could also be one of the most ineffective tools in the classroom, depending on what that tone is like from the educator. So we do have another video on this one.
We read about it, we thought about it, we wrote about it, now we get a chance to talk about it.
The tone of a teacher's voice is just as powerful as the words that are used.
And that's the part that's really super hard.
The tone should be confident, whether conveying empathy,
7:20. Okay, are you okay today?
Yeah.
excitement,
Excited! So everybody, let's.
or authority.
I want all computers closed to 3/4. And if I can see everybody.
A measured, quiet voice can sometimes be more powerful than a loud one.
See if that will help you communicate your message by giving the reader a feeling.
Whoosh.
Yelling or shrill speech are almost never as effective as calm, clear directions.
You can hear my voice clap once. You can hear my voice clap twice. So I'd like your clipboards down, pencils down, and let's talk about how we're going to work today.
So to wrap up our time together tonight, we want to talk about what it can look like to coach teachers and to support our colleagues with this work. All right, so if we zoom out and we look at the different areas of school that our admin support us with, I like to call this the wrap around teacher support wheel. So for example, if we start looking at planning and PLCs, if we're thinking about classroom management, admin can come alongside teachers during their planning with that specific lens for planning for classroom management by supporting a team conversation around what those routines, classroom expectations are. It's really helpful to do that in your PLCs because then you can be really clear as a team around what are your have tos, I like to call them, and your maybe do's. So for example, in my classroom, it drove me crazy when the students would sharpen their pencils in the middle of the lesson. So I had a very specific routine about when we sharpened pencils. But then maybe there's other teachers that that's not something that they want to do. So having that conversation with your PLC team around what are those have tos and maybe do's as it relates to your classroom management. And whenever coaches and admin can support those conversations, it can be really, really helpful. All right. In terms of observation and feedback, it's really helpful for a coach and an admin to observe how those routines and procedures are being used in the classroom, because maybe we have a plan of what we want them to look like, but then when we're actually implementing them, it might not be exactly the same. And so being there as an admin to support and provide feedback and coaching in the moment is always really, really helpful. In terms of DDI, we already talked a little bit about utilizing student data at the beginning of the year to identify students that are going to need additional support. You can look at attendance or behavior data. It's really about hitting the ground running intentionally to build relationships with students before maybe a difficult conversation. We've already built relationships. And then finally, professional development. As admin and coaches, providing ongoing professional development to continue to build our teachers' toolboxes is always really important. Like I had mentioned before, this work is infinitely improvable, and we all have something new to learn as it relates to classroom management. I will also say professional development can look like and sound like, for classroom management, teachers sharing ideas with other teachers. It doesn't have to come from admin, but admin can be there to support and facilitate that collaboration. All right. Another coaching piece we want to consider is the way that folks like to be coached and what is going to work best for them based off of their years of experience. So for example, it might work well and be received better by a new teacher if we take a more directive approach, providing that teacher with very clear action steps around what to do. When your students enter your classroom, here's what you need to do first, second, third, fourth. Taking a directive approach with a newer teacher can give them that clarity that they need to move forward. If we contrast that with a more experienced teacher, they may want a more non-directive approach where you as the coach or admin are sharing your observations with them and just coming alongside them and helping them to solve their own challenges, right? When I observed your students walking in the classroom to put away their materials and get their desk set up, it took 15 minutes. And these are the things that I observed. What might be some ways that we can get that from 15 minutes down to 8 minutes or whatever it is. And then finally, if we think about what coaching can look like in terms of the coaching cycle, goal setting, learning, observation and data collection, and reflection. This is the cycle that we repeat as we're coaching. During the goal setting phase, when you're thinking about classroom management, you would want to partner with that teacher to intentionally set goals around classroom management. What are you hoping to get better at? What are some things that didn't go well last year that you wanna start this year and really get better at? And then with learning, we want to create a plan with that teacher. What are we supporting with? Are we co-teaching? Are we modeling? Are we observing another teacher together? What is the learning going to look like? And as Olivia mentioned earlier in the session, we want to engage students in learning, but we also want to engage adults in learning. So how is that learning through coaching going to be active as it relates to learning more about classroom management? And as I mentioned before, when we observe and collect data, it's always really helpful to collect data, low inference notes, that are aligned to that goal or area of focus that the teacher has named, and to provide that data and observations to the teacher. That could be when we're thinking about classroom management, like I had mentioned before, timing those transitions and tracking the engagement of students. Maybe you want to count the number of students who are actively working versus passively working. Any data that you can provide keeps the coaching very student-centered rather than teacher-centered. And then finally, the reflection phase is the most important phase. It's providing time to meet with the teacher, share data and action steps, and to be there to support the reflection and what they're going to do differently next time so that you can start the cycle all over again. All right, so that pretty much concludes our session this evening. There are a couple of slides that we want to preview with you before we wrap up. But at this point, we'd love to go ahead and stop the recording and open up for about 5 to 6 minutes to have a discussion and some Q&A. Wanted to thank you all for joining this evening. If you are interested in a partnership with GSN, we have 2 pieces that we want to flag for you all. One is there, and this link is in your one-pager. There is an RFP for tiered services, mental health support, and restorative practices that is now open, and it will be closing November 15th. So if you are interested in getting some grant-funded restorative justice work for your school, please fill out that RFP. We also want to throw out there that it is almost easy season. It starts in October, and we are an approved provider. And so if you qualify for those grants, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk through what that would look like for you all. We also have the name of our director of development and his email on the slide, but you can also reach out to myself and Olivia as well. We have another forum, October 15th, same time, same place, on student-led goal setting and progress monitoring to drive academic outcomes. And then I've provided the session description for you there, as well as a registration link. So we hope to see you there, and we hope that you share these forums with your friends. We would love to have more folks join us for these. And then we also have a feedback survey. The feedback survey is really helpful in terms of the session that you experienced today, but it's also really helpful to hear from you what would be good for next time, so that we can be proactive and provide content that is relevant and helpful for you all, given your context. All right, and then our emails are also up on the slide and in your one-pager. Thank you, thank you, thank you for everything that you do. I know that this work is equal parts difficult and rewarding all at the same time. And so spending an hour with us, it feels like a privilege that you chose to spend an hour with us today. So thank you for that.